All right, so now let's go ahead and see what the fourth topic is all about. You'll see here that it asks us to be able to rationalize either the denominator or the numerator of the fraction. You might recall that in algebra classes in the past, you've often been told that you shouldn't ever leave a radical in the denominator of a fraction. Now, that's not actually a true thing. You can leave radicals wherever the heck you want them, but it is convenient at times to be able to manipulate where a radical shows up. And that's really the main algebraic concept and focus here. What if I wanted to remove that square root from the denominator of the fraction? What if I didn't want to have any radicals down there at all? So let's go ahead and see how we would actually work through this. And I'll squeeze this in right over here. So when looking at something like 4a, and I have an expression like this, I can come up with a really clever way to remove the radical from the denominator and keep the fraction the same value. That's really the key here. I can't do something like anything with like squaring a quantity or something like that. That's not going to be okay because I want to figure out what this expression is the same as. And if I square a value or do other manipulations, that aren't very select manipulations, I won't keep the value of this quantity the same. So here's what I'm going to go ahead and do. I believe that I can get this radical to be removed from the denominator of the fraction by multiplying by something. Now you might be thinking, Kyle, wait a minute. How can you just choose to multiply by something when you just said that you want to keep this thing exactly the same as it was at the start? That is, I don't want to change its overall value. Well, there's only one number in the world that I could multiply by and maintain the same value that I started with. And that would be the value of 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply here by the value of 1. But 1 can take on a lot of other forms. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to multiply by what we call the conjugate of this denominator. The conjugate just means that I'm going to be taking this square root of x minus 3 and changing it to a plus 3. So just changing that minus to a plus. And it actually works the same way. If this had been a plus 3 at the beginning, the conjugate would have been by changing the plus back to a minus. Now, interestingly here, you'll note that I have only multiplied by the value of 1. And now I can see what that gets me. I can see the advantage of this. So on the numerator here, I'm just going to actually leave what I have kind of unmultiplied out. It's not really going to be worth my time because this question doesn't care at all what shows up in the numerator. I only care that the denominator is simplified. So let's take a look at the denominator. Notice that I have to do square root of x minus 3 times a square root of x plus 3. Now, if I simply go ahead and set that up and get ready to do some distributing, I might notice that actually what I'm going to be left with here is a difference of squares. Remember when we had expressions in the past, like in x squared minus a 4, we knew that we could factor something like this into x minus 2, x plus 2. Well, we kind of have the same shape here, right? We have something minus something and something plus something. So notice I can actually go ahead and quickly rewrite out that denominator in the following way. I can simply go ahead and state that, I'm going to get this first item in here squared in the result. So square root of x squared would just be x. I'm then going to get minus, because it is difference of squares, and I'll get subtracted from my leading term. I'll end up with the other item that's in the parentheses being squared, in this case 3. So notice I'm left with x minus 9. Now, very conveniently here, I end up with an x minus 9 in the numerator and in the denominator of my fraction, and so I can remove those, and ultimately I'm just left with square root of x plus 3, or technically square root of x plus 3 over 1. But this is perfectly good. Notice I have rationalized the denominator. The denominator of my fraction now no longer has any radicals in it because the denominator of my fraction is a 1. If there was other stuff down there, that's also totally fine. That's not an issue. But I just have to get to the point where there is no radical in the denominator. As such, you might actually even be able to state that the previous line was a perfectly valid answer to a question like this. It was able to manipulate, so no radical appeared in the denominator. It was just nice to simplify things down since that option was available. Go ahead and try parts B and C on your own, and again, remember the solutions are up in Blackboard.